this book, Strategy Rules, we looked at Bill Gates, Andy Grove, and Steve Jobs. And it was very clear that at the beginning of their careers, they didn't exactly know what they were doing, at least in terms of building a company. So probably the most important element of strategy that evolved in all three of them was learning how to implement or how to execute, how to build an organization, build a company that was able to put their ideas into action. I can talk a little bit more about that, but probably the most natural strategist of these three guys was Bill Gates. He seemed to have a very clear idea of what he wanted to do, and he had to learn how to do it. He had to learn how to build a company, but he had a very sharp sense of the market. And to some extent, Steve Jobs did as well, but Jobs was not as good at actually building a team or building a company, so he actually struggled in the early years. He got fired from Apple in 1984. Essentially, he almost went bankrupt 3 times. So it really wasn't until the 2000s that Steve Jobs really learned how to be a CEO, how to not only make a decision about strategy, but make crisp decisions about products, pricing, markets, and his team, most importantly, his team. So we spend a lot of time in this book trying to understand how Gates, Grove, and Jobs not only thought about the future, but how they acted and when they took actions. So what was particularly distinctive about these three guys is that they developed fairly clear visions of what they wanted to do in the future. It didn't all happen at the same time, but they were very concrete in what they did. So we have some evidence about the planning systems that they used. And actually, the only company that was very formal in planning was Intel. But what they did is they would break down their actions into very small chunks. Like, okay, I believe that in the future, personal computers are going to be everywhere because Moore's law seems to be true. Semiconductors are doubling in power every other year. Prices are coming down. Around 1975, Bill Gates came to the conclusion that that meant computers would be everywhere. And so what he did is act on it immediately, almost. You know, if you believe this is the future, what do you do today? He believed that was the future. So he quit school and he created a software company to build programming languages. That was his assumption. Steve Jobs did the same thing a year later, came to the same conclusion. Computers would be everywhere, although his perspective was different. He was not a programmer like Bill Gates. He was not a technologist, but he loved technology. So his conclusion was, Moore's law is true, computers are going to be everywhere. I'm going to build a computer that's as easy to use as a toaster or a typewriter. Just take it out of the box, put it on a table, and turn it on, and it works. So not only did they have ideas about the future, they acted on them very quickly. And Intel as well, once the senior manager was convinced that their future would be, or the best future for them would be to build microprocessors and focus on that, because the semiconductor memory business had become a commodity business, intense price competition with the Japanese and later on the Koreans. So they basically exited all those product businesses and just focused on microprocessors. But their planning was very, very crisp. It was basically in 6-month chunks. How do they build a particular factory? How do they replicate that factory somewhere else? How do they plan for the next design as they're doing the first design? So very, very near term, not trying to plan something that's going to take them 3 years, but actually plan out 6 months at a time. Right. one of the distinctive features of what we call platform markets is that powerful network effects and some other factors can lead to one company winning most of the market. So the question really becomes, how does a smaller company play in platform markets? And one of the key features of a platform, particularly in what we call innovation platforms, like an operating system for a phone, is that they need what we call complementary innovations from other companies. So, to give you a good example, if I can get my phone out. So this is a product made by Apple, an Apple iPhone, but it's also a platform. It gives the user access to, right now, almost 3 million applications through the Apple App Store. And these are not apps that Apple has created. For the most part, it's other companies, some of them very small, some of them big. So one really important way that small or medium-sized companies can participate in the platform ecosystem is as what we call a complementer. They can build their products and make them available through these platforms, whether it's smartphones or personal computers or cloud computing platforms in some cases. So that's probably the most important way. The second thing that small or medium-sized companies can do is to compete directly as a platform company, and there are ways to do that. Most people forget that Apple, Intel, and Microsoft started as small companies. They started as 2 people, or Intel was 8 people when they started. Microsoft was 2, Apple was 2. So, it's not like they started off as powerful platform leaders. They built that position. So there are ways to do it, and ways to do it like partnering with a bigger company and putting yourself in a good position. Microsoft and Intel essentially were suppliers and partners of IBM early on, and that's how they became leaders in the PC era. Another way to do it is to essentially build a bridge to the platform, to the existing platform, and to actually do things to reduce the power of the current platform. We call that, in this book and other things we've written, judo strategy. So you use the power of the platform against the platform leader. So you, for example, create an application that is compatible with multiple platforms and maybe has some unique features itself. And gradually, if you build up a following, you can kind of then take it separately and create your own platform. To some extent, and a company in China that has done that is Xiaomi, for example. Now, I know it was more, it's not necessarily been on the rise, it's been on a bit of a struggle the last year or two, but Xiaomi actually came from nowhere and created its own version of a platform, for example, in the smartphones, by taking a version of open source Google Android and making it somewhat particular to its own company. There are also niche positions like specialized operating systems, if you're talking about software, or for example, in areas like biotechnology, we're looking at certain companies that are creating kind of new ways of doing drug discovery or new ways of treating different kinds of drugs. So even though they're small biotech companies, they have an important technology that becomes kind of a core or a really essential base for other companies to build products or solutions around it.